Oh no, I was just gonna give my you asked for news or like positive updates or something. Um, when I was traveling, when I was doing my traveling for 9 months, I got connected with like a few other writers, and we're all like working on various projects, and we're all in like a little like Facebook group together. So one of these guys just finished the first draft. I would say that the full like manuscript on his like horror novel that he's been working on for a couple years. So he just sent it to me, and I started reading the first couple pages. And thank God, there's actually it's not horrible. There's some like quality to it. Because don't you hate when like your friends, your artist friends, send you something to read and it's god awful, and you're gonna have to think of something nice to say to them when they ask you.
It's also very exhausting when it's a very long piece, you know. And I've read a lot of bad writing in my day, and when you know after 5 pages that the writing is not where it needs to be, but you still have to read 350 pages of it, um, it can be a disheartening experience, you know. But anyway, go ahead.
No, but I think that like if you're someone who like I guess like if you're a writer and you're like a reader, I think you can kind of get that vibe after like the first page or so. Even after the first paragraph or like the first sentence, you can get a vibe of okay, this person has a grasp on the English language. This person is like, has some grasp on like being a quality writer. So I got that vibe just from like the first like like page or something. I don't know if you feel that way, Professor. If you feel from like just the way that they structure their sentences and stuff. Okay, this person like okay, they have something.
Oh, absolutely. I know exactly what I like and don't like, and but people put a lot of stress on the first pages for that reason. But I actually don't. I kind of just hurry up through the first page because oh geez, am I frozen? Just that's a great image of me. Um, I usually skip to the second or third page, you know, because people put so much time into that first page because they want to impress an agent or an editor. But I'm very particular. As you know, I write fantasy, but I spent most of my life reading literature like realism, you know, that kind of stuff. And I value character development and insight and language. Poetry even, you know, in a prose manner, not line breaks and things, but like when you have beautiful prose, like maybe you're describing a battle, maybe you're describing a fight between, not a fight, but a disagreement between people or someone coming of age and coming to grips with some new thing about themselves. It's the way you write it, the rhythm and the attention to the world. And if a writer's great, and sorry you asked this question, Robert, and you got such a long answer, but if a writer's great, I'll almost read anything they write, even if it's not a very interesting plot, because I get to be in that mindset and that point of view. You personally, I'm only saying this for you, Robert, because you brought up David Foster Wallace. I like there are certain things, certain scenes in Infinite Jest that are my favorite of all time, and they're really not there's not a lot of interesting plot development. It's the way that the author looks at the world and makes me see things that I didn't see before. But anyway, that's a long answer to your question. Yes, I'm very picky, and I get a lot of people asking me to help them with manuscripts, and I understand your pain. But anyway, go ahead. It's a good novel, though.
Yeah, it's he comes from like a small town in Delaware. That's his real life, and so he moved to Tucson, Arizona. So he's sort of writing, and I've never really read a lot of horror. I don't like to be scared, so it's definitely like it. I relate to what you're saying in the sense of like if the writing is good, it doesn't matter necessarily what they're writing about, right? It could be like a good writer writing about like a conversation between like two people who are talking about which type of like brand of water they like more, right? But if it's a good writer, they can kind of get away with anything. So basically, he's from a small town in Delaware, and his novel is about basically like the heroin epidemic there, but the sort of the addiction kind of comes in the form of like a demon, I guess, that passes from like person to person. So I think he's playing around a little bit with like magical realism, but then he's also kind of playing around with these sort of social issues and sort of like working class issues from like the place, the rural place that he came from. So I think it's interesting, at least the premise that he tried to like go fantastical, but then also base it in something that we as like real humans are dealing with, like in the real world, and then base it also on his real life experiences.
I'm glad it's good. I'm happy for you. I have a friend who has been my friend my whole life, and I sometimes read his work and I get bored and I don't want to read it. And it's the worst feeling in the world. It's like my least favorite thing is to really love someone and care about them, but like not necessarily be in love with their writing. And I suspect people in my life feel that way about me. It's kind of sad, but there's no accounting for taste. A lot of people don't care about the prose quality. They just want to know what happens. I just want to know who hooks up with who fights who wins in the end, and they don't really care if the sentences are insightful or if the author's bringing something more to their perspective of the world. Um, I just happen to be one of those readers, and we're underserved readers like myself because there aren't a lot of writers who write kind of genre that's elevated. They're out there. Anyway, this is a whole long discussion, Robert, that I could totally get sidetracked with. So, because we have three people to workshop today, I don't want to waste everybody's time. You guys are probably like, why is he just talking to Robert? I would love to talk to everybody, but and also I was going to say, because this class is so impersonal, I would love it if you guys ever see me on campus next quarter or whenever. Just come say hi, because I'm not going to recognize you, and it's weird to have read things that you've shared things with me that I think are personal and inspiring, and it's cool to have relationships with, not relationships, weird word, but you know what I mean, like friendships with students, not even friendships really, but some kind of connection with the people I've worked with. And I know Robert and John and Sam from in person, and Maria, and maybe a couple others of you, but anyway, it would be nice to like put writers with personalities once we're all back on campus. Yeah, that's going in the eval. I made you uncomfortable. I'm sorry. Of course, I'm actually a very socially phobic person, so take that with a grain of salt. When I say relationship or friendship, I mean like in my stilted, nervous way. Like, hello, okay, it's good to see you. Okay, I gotta go. I'm that guy. Anyway, who wants to go first? We have three great pieces to talk about to take us out on our final voyage.
I don't mind just ripping the Band-Aid off and just getting it over with.
Okay, as long as you still are excited to talk about the pieces after yours. Will you be?
I promise I won't be a low energy Jeb after my piece.
Okay. Okay, folks, you know the drill. We go through, we talk about what's happening page by page, very briefly summarizing things, in about 10% of the total, just kind of making sure we hit the sweet spots. So this piece, we've got some preamble here, this funny or disturbing picture, depending on your point of view. And then we move into, to me, where's the Disney stuff? I love that it's for Disney Plus. That part at the very end, when I think that joke's over, and then at the very end, it's Disney Plus again, just cracks me up. But so we have these bulleted points as we read through. And the bulleted points are sort of general writing advice. I don't know if these are specific to something, Robert. Are they specifically from a textbook or something?
They were from your week 2 exercise.
Did I word it exactly like what you included?
Yeah, I think I just copy and pasted what you wrote. Hopefully you don't sue me or come after me for copyright.
No, I love it because I don't even remember writing it. So I'm reading it and I'm like, that sounds like something from a textbook. So like, I'm kind of proud of myself because I don't know, it sounds like legitimate stuff. That's all advice. I mean, none of that's from me. That's all general writing advice. So we go with this dramatic scene. Now, did you want these left in here, Robert? I got to ask that right off the bat. The bulleted points.
Yeah, that was purposeful. That was supposed to kind of go along with like the title of, right, like minor victories in storytelling, of like this idea that, okay, there's these negative experiences that happen, but I'm getting a story out of them.
Okay. So it starts though with the beginning of what looks like it's going to be a threesome, and we learn that you had kind of wanted this to happen. It's not something that had happened in your life. While they're like the people, you think there's these cool people that are doing these orgies and having fun, etc. Um, it's weird though, because then we learn that you did sell cocaine. So then it's like, wait, what? Aren't you one of those people? But anyway, so what ensues here is there's awkwardness, and the awkwardness increases. And yeah, we learn about the people first, the people that are involved. We get some blow by blow details, but then we get these kind of humorous, self conscious details, sucking in my gut, and things like that, feeling constipated in the bathroom. Um, make this just a wee bit smaller. There we go. Okay, and things don't go as planned. It's not quite as fun and as much of a party as you had maybe romanticized it to be. Um, okay, does that check out with everybody? Um, and you weren't able to complete the fun. So that's an experience that some people can relate to or not, but regardless, you understand the emotions involved. It's not the triumphant victory that the author had hoped for, I assume. But what's interesting is you pull out from that and say, but that's not as embarrassing as this time I was not allowed to go to the prom and my entire school saw me there. And that was even more embarrassing, which is interesting because some of us might think the other thing was more difficult than the prom thing, but it tells us a lot about your personality. And then we get the meta um, bulleted writing instruction here to interrupt your scene. So you interrupt with Dear Dad. And this is about you going to basic combat training. That's boot camp, right? Same thing. I mean, John's on his head, so I'm going to take that as my answer. It sounds awful. It sounds like you're going to like Universal, like when they have Halloween horror nights and everybody's just coming at you, harassing you. It sounds like that. But anyway, you survive it. There's a lot of push-ups involved. There's a lot of people yelling at new recruits involved. Okay, and eventually though, let's see. Yeah, you want to quit. And eventually though, you become a platoon leader. I believe that's the term. And it is a success in the midst of this military experience that ends up kind of being aborted. It doesn't quite work out for you. You don't like the exercise. It doesn't feel quite like a right fit for you. But you did kind of succeed because you noticed the other platoon leader I think they're in another room or something, but you overhear them kind of doing what you were doing to build team with your platoon members. I might be kind of summarizing a bit too much here, but I don't want to. I think when let me know if I missed something. And if anybody's chatting, let me know. Okay. Doing a little screen rearranging. Anyway, we get all these details. To me, it's a long scene or sequence, I should say, of scenes that take place in the military. I enjoyed them though because I've never been in the military. I've always wondered if I would have made it, if I would have been one of the people who succeeded in the military. I always wonder that. But I've never been through it. But lots of push-ups. This letter to your dad basically lets him know, hey, sorry I let you down. I love you. We get a bulleted point here with the meta commentary. After a new scene or passage reaches a satisfactory stopping point, return to the first dramatic scene. So we go back to Erica, and now we have this questionable box of condoms under Erica's bed, which ends up being a kind of comedic moment where, you know, we have the Magnum versus regular condoms, which is going to be uncomfortable for maybe all of us to talk about. But I kind of feel like nowadays, if you're in a public place and you have to tell the person which ones you want, like at a gas station or like at the student store on campus, I feel like everybody has to pretend like they want the Magnums just because everyone around you now is paying attention to what you chose. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe everybody does need that. I don't know. But the joke here is that she's not hiding them from you because of any nefarious reason. It's just because, you know, there's a size differential. And then this launches us into your sense of humor with others when you go and you look for a different size condom and you have a moment with the clerk. And it relates to another time when you played a joke on, I don't remember if he's the owner of Pepper's, the restaurant. The owner, yeah. And he asked why you shaved your head. And you tell him, so you do a practical joke on him, tell him you're basically dying or in chemo, and then say, I'm just kidding. And he cracks up about it. And it reveals something about your personality and the desire to find a laugh wherever you can, even if it means laughing at yourself. And then we get at the end your anti-self-help guide, which is funny. And we learn a bit about your family, that failure was permitted, but to not even make an attempt was not allowed. I think that's a pretty good way to raise kids. It's the doing nothing that drives me nuts with kids. No offense to anybody. I just like have a couple of kids that are not making much effort lately. It's been driving me nuts. But we get this real short moment that says a lot here. This memory from 2006 of the kind of attitude your parents had with you. It says a lot without saying it. Get back on the bike, you'll survive. And then we get this cool quote from Kelly Clarkson, and then Disney Plus, to be continued on Disney Plus. So this is going to tickle the funny bone of some readers and maybe not for other readers. I really don't know. I'm no judge. With humor, as you know, Robert, it's very idiosyncratic. So somebody like me is probably getting all your jokes and connecting, but other readers might feel differently. I really don't know. But comedy and revelation, really throwing yourself out there and exposing yourself to readers, even if it's difficult or potentially embarrassing, you seem to have really made an effort to do both of those things. Like, I'm going to laugh at myself, and also I'm going to take some risks and risk public embarrassment for the sake of creating something people can connect with on a deeper level than when we just talk to each other in class or at a grocery store. So I want to know, what do people think what is this essay ultimately about? If you had to boil this down to one or two ideas, what would you say? But first, Aaron writes, I really enjoyed it. Robert taught me that humor is just as impactful as something that isn't, for me personally. And that's great. That's wonderful feedback for Robert to get. I would love if somebody said I taught them something. So there you go, Robert, right off the bat. But what would y'all say this is about? If we're going to boil it down. I mean, we know it's memoir. We know it's Robert looking at some life experiences, and he's chosen 3 or 4 of them and put them in conversation with each other. But what's this about ultimately?
I think how if life brings you down, you still get up and keep going.
I missed the end. If life brings you down, what, John?
But you still gotta get up and keep going.
Get up and keep going. And we get that from Mom at the end with the bicycle, right? In case we didn't pick it up along the way. Other things, to me, there's also a kind of, you know, that term self-flagellation, I think? It's a weird word, but you know where people like take a whip and they're just like hitting themselves on the back? It's like a spiritual practice. there's something about that too. Like you're kind of taking some pain, like you're kind of inviting pain on yourself, Robert. Like, well, what can I reveal? What's the most embarrassing thing I could reveal? And then just go ahead and do it, because most writers won't take the risk. And if you're the one who will take the risk, it does get you noticed. And people respond. I've said it many times in these classes. The more you guys reveal those things that you think maybe are going to be alienating and make everyone not appreciate you, the opposite happens in these workshops. And we all just like love you for sharing it, because we felt it too in our lives. I got some of that from this. Though your experiences are a lot different than mine, I still, like, when I think of some cringy moments in my life, I compare them to yours and feel like, hey, I can turn these into literary gold. But anyway, is there other thoughts? I don't want this to just be like a three-way conversation. Anyone who wants to jump in, please interrupt or jump on the chat, because it is a workshop discussion. It's not a lecture.
I will agree how open it is and how unafraid Robert is to put everything within the story. So those tend to be some of the best stories. How people are willing to put themselves out there no matter what happens. Because it's a truthful story. And the more truth you put out, there, the more entertaining the story will be. No matter how the public looks at you, they're just happy that you're brave enough to do so.
Like those guys that do Jackass, and probably everybody hates Jackass. I really don't know what college students think. I haven't seen it in many years, but I remember when it was on MTV, and I know for whatever reason, one of the Jackass guys is back. I don't know if there's a new movie. I just heard on NPR an interview with him, but it's kind of a similar thing. They're willing to just throw themselves out there, even if it means destroying themselves in the process for the sake of making people laugh and giving them something. There's some similar self-sacrifice happening here in Robert's essay that I appreciate. Kathy writes, because of the title, I understood the purpose as explaining the reader's different types of storytelling, especially because of the prompts included. Yeah, so how do you all feel about that? Let's talk about that for a bit. Well, let's not talk about that. You know what? We're going to talk about that second. The first thing I want to know, I actually want to know what Sam wrote. It was really clever to include the class exercise prompts in the piece, as it allows us to experience the story in various out of chronological order. And I also like that it kind of works as a primer or guide to writing, because it's like, well, here's what the exercise says, and here's how that looks when you put it, when you actually try to attempt this. And I think if you took those exercise bullets out, you would have an essay that works. I believe that. I believe they work with it too. I'm a little bit jaded. I'm older than most of the students in this class. I've read a lot of meta fictional or meta non-fictional, whatever, like where the storyteller draws attention to the fact that they are telling a story. So for me, that's not as novel as it might be for the rest of the class. I told Robert in my letter to him that I'm 60% against it, 40% for it, but you better listen to the class. And I'm glad people are weighing in about that, because it sounds like people do like it. And that's great for Robert to know. But what are your favorite elements? What are your favorite pieces in the essay? This is the best part of workshop. People want to know what's working. Maria or David or Shania, Kathy, Sam, anyone. Otherwise, it's just going to be me talking, and occasionally John. Maria writes, I like the humor. I enjoyed the narrator putting themselves out there. Humor is big. I love the humor. It's my favorite thing about it. I think humor is hard to write. And I can't tell how much of this is extra humorous, because I can connect to some of these situations, just being male, you know. I don't know if that's a factor or not. I don't know if this lands differently with people who identify differently than I do. I don't know. That's a question we could pursue. But I love the humor. And it's a nice, I also like the 1-2 punch, Robert, of humor with some embarrassment. And there are some low points in here, you know, like having to admit to your father that you did not succeed in the military. I like that combination. If you want to be fancy, you say it's a combination of bathos and pathos. So bathos is humor, pathos is like, what is it? Like tragedy, that kind of thing. Deep feeling. Other things?
I just overall like the way it was told, like out of chronological order in a sense. Like it goes from like a little present day-ish to somewhere in like 2019 to somewhat back in the present, then ending off like way in the past of 2006. That's what I thought was the most clever thing that I've seen, because I think Robert commented on like something that I did like in previous works, like how some stories are successfully told out of chronological order. Like I think some would be like Pulp Fiction or 500 Days of Summer, where it's like told out of these random orders just to like capture like the reader's attention for us to figure out like, exactly like where should we start off, how exactly the story plays out from different orders, as because we're kind of told from like the common beginning, middle, end of like where, say, the story would have started when the author was like 10 years old to now, it would have been like kind of like the same thing, but starting off with the author the present day versus like kind of in like their early adolescence, early adult years to like back to being an adult and then now being a kid. Like it's all showing like the same common thing of like the what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Like even if we might be too proud to admit our faults and stuff, but like it still shows how in the end like they're not afraid to like express themselves or talk about like how they feel and stuff throughout the piece, like showing like how even the most difficult of times they found like their own sense of humor in a way.
I agree with everything you just said, Sam. I think that I think it's also it's good for everyone to realize too that essays really don't need to be chronological. You could have one chronological storyline happening, and you could break that up with another storyline that you're kind of putting in conversation with it that maybe is not chronological, or you have one storyline and you pepper it with sections of, you know, well, here's something that happened when I was 8 years old that might shed light on how you feel about my decision here. Or here's something that happened in my first relationship in high school and how that breakup affected me. Or here's something about what I hope to be in the future and steps I've taken towards it. And you can tell me if I'm crazy or not. And you come back to that main story. Robert follows the Erica story and comes back to it. And meanwhile, the other things are kind of interpolated in there, like the military, the prom memory, the falling off the bike, those kinds of things. But it helps you piece together personality, because personality and the way we perceive the world, the way we think of ourselves is not a chronological thing. You don't immediately think, when I was a baby, I was like this. Then I was like this in second grade, and third grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade. You have all these different memories. And usually the most traumatic or happiest memories are the ones that really stick with you. And that's usually where you're going to get energy in writing nonfiction. Shania, I feel you. Everyone said what I wanted to say, but I also enjoyed the humor. And I thought the use of prompts was really creative instead of the typical essay format. Excuse me. I also liked that there was lots of dialogue in some areas. It made it feel like a fiction story. Yes, something we often forget. Let's look at that dialogue. There's an art to dialogue. We don't necessarily want to have every single aspect of a conversation. Well, the military stuff is working in a different way. We're getting all this shouting happening. It's just kind of just coming at us, the way it comes at these new recruits, and Robert's one of them, and how overwhelming that could be. But there are other moments where we have more intimate conversation between Erica and Robert these kinds of exchanges here. Page 12. I like it too. I feel like I'm watching a show. I feel like I get to be part of this. Whether this is exactly how the conversation happens doesn't really matter. The only time it matters is if Erica comes out, Robert's a published writer, and Erica says, this is not what happened. This is actually what happened. And then all of a sudden you have a crisis and a public spectacle and a drama. But feel free to recreate scenes a bit in this class, as long as you're not messing with the fundamental truth of what your conversation was about with the person you're writing about. It's okay to fabricate a little bit. Just make sure you're not making stuff up whole cloth. That kind of thing gets you in trouble, and then readers will never trust you again. Well, I love all the things people have pointed out. I guess, do we have suggestions for improvement for the essay? I mean, Robert would probably like to hear that it's perfect. Go publish it. But are there elements that could be improved in a second draft? Do you have questions that are left unresolved? Do you feel like it meets the expectations it sets for itself from the beginning?
I would say remove the statue pick for school and put it back on for publishing.
What was the first part, John?
I said remove the statue pick for school and put it back on for publishing.
Right. Take out the picture and go publish it. Well, the picture is probably polarizing too. I don't know. Does the picture add a lot or not? Because the picture is a little bit of a distraction for me, because the person in the picture with you and that experience is not part of this essay, though the phallic statue certainly does resonate with things you talk about in the essay. So I guess I'm curious if people think it adds anything or not. Kathy says no. I had a moment where I wasn't quite sure about the tone where are we? Let me find it. I think the condom conversation was really good. Felt like something from a show. This part feels, I guess I'm just talking about this one line right here. I even left the music on for her. It made it seem like maybe you would not treat her well, but like, look at me leaving the music on for her. Like I'm being nice to her. I kind of assumed you and Erica had a good friendship and were nice to each other already. That line stood out to me as not quite fitting. And that might be about it for me. I don't have a lot of suggestions because I think you did a pretty good job, Robert. Robert, feel free to jump in, because sometimes if you ask questions, it gets other people talking.
Sure. I think that that line, I guess I debated with it like a little bit. I even left the music on for in a sense it was supposed to be kind of funny, like, look at what a good guy I am. But like it's supposed to be kind of almost parroting in a sense, like but I can understand, like, if does it come off sort of instead of like being like funny, does it come off more like asshole-ish or something?
I'll tell you exactly why it's weird for me. It's because there's no discussion or investigation of whether you're a good guy. You seem like a good guy, I mean, you're not taking advantage of anyone, nothing. I mean, it sounds like people are inviting you to do whatever you're doing with them, and you're the one, getting constipated and stomach pains and not feeling like you can perform. It doesn't sound like you're being aggressive or anything like that. So it kind of stood out to me. I was like, well, I wasn't even thinking about whether Robert's a decent guy or not. And then it made me wonder that, like, well, why did he say that? So that's why it didn't land for me. But if that's all you have to do is delete that one line, I mean, you're in a pretty good place.
Yeah, I mean, Erica and I are both like stand-up comedians, so like I think that she could like get like you know like if I like when we make jokes at each other, you know what I mean? That it's not like some like personal attack. So I think like I probably I think I made a joke to her or something like that about like be like, look, I'm gonna make sure that you're safe. I'll even leave the music on for you. Like look at this 5-star service, and it kind of was just like a joking thing for her. So it's not meant to be like too deep or anything. But if that line, yeah, if that line like stands out for you, I guess I could consider taking it out or putting a little bit more context to it. That it was kind of like more something that was kind of a joking piece of humor for Erica and I guess if that helps.
Does anybody see a major issue that you would want to see Robert address, or something that didn't make sense to you, or anything like that? Because, this is his chance to have multiple perspectives looking at his work and getting help. Um, Kathy, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Um, I mean, one thing I'm noticing in every single piece, like including mine, is just being like nitpicky about the verbs. So, like, for example, you can see right here on the page, it says, I hesitated, not able to find the words. It could have said like unable to find the words. And I think there's other places that I like pointed out. Because it can remove like a good amount of unnecessary words and also kind of like shorten it, and then maybe if he wants to expand on other areas. Yeah, but that's just what I'm noticing, like in everything, like even including my own.
Amen to that, Kathy. I was just looking at some writing that I had done, I think a year or two ago last night, and I was like, oh my God, like every sentence I saw opportunities to make better subject verb combos. A lot of times we get wordy with prepositional phrases and passive constructions and there is and it was and those kinds of boring subject verbs. We have too many of them. I think for the most part, Robert, you did a pretty good job of writing tight, concise sentences, and I know you value that style of writing. Now, this is not my copy of the piece. You're going to get my copy of your PDF is going to have stuff written all over it. So I also, like Kathy, had some moments where maybe I thought you could have worded things a little bit better, but I have that for everybody. I offer everybody suggestions like that, and you can take them or leave them. Trying to think if there's this part, I'm not sure why it's italicized. I don't know if it kind of distracts me because I want to save italics for emphasis or maybe like a shocking thought or something. But this looks like it's just a description of a scene. One day I came in with a shaved head. Maybe just leave it unadorned, straightforward text. But I think you can tell by the nature of what we're talking about, Robert, that you've written something good because we're talking about nitpicky stuff. Are you feeling good, Robert?
Yeah, I'll appease you, John. I'll take out the giant golden statue of the penis, John, and when I submit it for publication. If that makes you happy.
Oh no, not to appease me. I don't mind.
Just
It's just nowadays you'll offend no telling who. So I'm just doing it for your code. But if you want to keep it in there, by all means.
no, I used this piece for my MFA applications. I certainly took out the giant penis photo for like Columbia University and stuff.
What about the anti-self-help guy? Good, bad, keep it, leave it, change it? Don't say bad. If it is bad, please don't. That was me just trying to get people to talk. Yeah, I'm gonna raise my hand. It's bad. It's not bad. To me, it's funny. It's hitting a lot of the same notes that you hit in the essay, so I like it. I think another suggestion I would make is maybe weave this stuff in sooner, the stuff that's on the page right here, starting with point number 3 and including the scene of your mom telling you to get back on the bike, you'll survive. I felt like you might foreshadow that earlier in the piece. You've got dad in there, but mom kind of just shows up at the end. I think it's a great scene. I think it deserves to be where it is, but maybe one other nod to that kind of upbringing from your early childhood. Something, if you could squeeze that in. It doesn't even need to be another section. It might be something that you work into while you're at basic training or boot camp, something that you remember your mom telling you, or something, you know, during the moments when you're having a less than I don't know how to describe the threesome scene, a less than what you'd expected threesome. You might recall your mom. That could be funny too, because you really don't want to think about your mom in a time like that. So something to think about, just to give a sense of coherence to the whole piece. I think you're going to have to squeeze things out of us, Robert.
Sure. I know that, like, okay, so like a lot of people that are working like in the fiction workshop class are like thinking about, okay, how this is going to expand into a novel. Well, I guess I see the same thing sort of like for my nonfiction pieces of like, how can I continue to grow, like, you know, this into like, you know, more and more memoir pieces, or how can it eventually grow into something that's like a full length nonfiction thing. So I guess I would want to know from any of you, is it like the military stuff that you would want like a whole nother, like, you know, story about? Is it the stuff with Erica and Myra that you want a whole nother story about? Is it the stuff about, you know, my raising of like my stepmother having this sort of very like, you know, strict but upbringing, but also came with all these very important like moral lessons? Is there anywhere, I guess, where you guys could see expansion or opportunities to write other memoir pieces?
Maybe expand more on the boot camp aspect, because I'm pretty sure it was a little bit longer. So if you want to make like a memoir piece or expand this to memoir piece, I would suggest probably expand that part of it. You know, talk about a little bit more about some overnights, how you probably couldn't sleep, or some of the drills. Expand more when you were platoon leader. You know, just some more aspects of it.
I'm also interested in what inspired you to enlist, Robert. It's an I love that. I love the way I look. I'm not, because you don't seem like it was something you necessarily wanted to do that badly. So I'm curious what led up to it. You know, that could reveal something about how you grew up or where you were at that time in your life. Does that sound promising? I'm not sure.
Sure. I mean, you know, like I was never really meant to be like a college student. Like I passed, like I skated through high school with like D's, you know what I mean? So going to college like sort of took a whole was like a left turn for me. So I had been thinking about the military since I was like 14, and then when I was 18, I looked into it like with the recruiter, and it didn't work out at that time. And then years later, when I got to like UCR, I there was like something in like the work study program about like doing like National Guard or reserves, and then how it would help pay for schooling. And so I revisited the idea of the military again, and I made contact with the recruiter through like the UCR's work study thing, and then it sort of just like went from there. And I did 10 weeks of basic training in May 2019. And had to take some time off from UCR. Partly the reason why I'm 25 and still working on my bachelor's, because I've like taken time away to kind of pursue these sort of side ventures and stuff. But no, I guess, I mean, I could write a whole memoir piece about that. Yeah, the military is something that I guess I thought about since I was like in ninth grade. I mean, it was always something. It's like, if you don't think you're going to go to college, what opportunities do you have as like a young person? So it was like, it was, I thought about, okay, this is my only maybe possible career path if I'm not an academic.
A couple of things. I think that would benefit the piece, but I'm not sure how long we want this piece to be. It starts getting to the point where it's like, well, is this going to be Robert's entire life story? Which I know you kind of have written already. You've written so much on your own because you're a true writer. You're not just writing to turn something in. You write whether there's a class or not, which is great. I mean, that's going to serve you well in the world when there's nobody saying your story's due for workshop. That you need to be that kind of writer. So that's great. I just don't know if we need all of that in this. I wonder if you could just put everything you just told us in like 1 or 3 sentences. Like growing up this way, you're going to have to be very concise. I'm going to choose the absolute perfect subjects and verbs so I can convey this to my audience without going into a long thing about opportunities and high school and all of that stuff, which maybe you're going to discuss in a different chapter or different essay or however you plan to use these nonfiction pieces. But something to acknowledge it, because it's, people have different reasons for enlisting, and it's interesting to learn about them. Some families have legacies of people who serve, and some people don't. My dad was in the Army kind of like you. He served for a while. He wanted to fight in the Korean War, and he didn't get to. And then he worked for the Postal Service and drank himself to death after that. But it could shed some light. But also what Aaron is saying, being 34, I feel you, Robert. I was going to say, I think people who go to college a little bit later actually get more out of it. I know I just would have done so much better if I was a little bit older when I was getting my undergraduate degree, because I would have appreciated the readings more and been less concerned with my social life and wanting to be cool and wanting to go to parties and things. I would have gotten a lot more out of it, And, by the way, I've taught students who are like in their 60s and stuff, and I don't know. I don't really think that you were laughing when you said it, but I just say no shame to that. I think any time you're getting education, it's beneficial to you. Except for the debt part, but I don't want to start that topic. Anybody have there we go. Maria Gonzalez writes, the Erica and Myra story was definitely my favorite part of the story, specifically your friendship/relationship with Erica. The dialogue was fun to read. Yeah, it is fun to read. And I get super uncomfortable talking about like sex scenes and things with students just because it's dicey as a professor, but I definitely could connect with that. There have been times in my life where like something like what you're writing about may have happened or something, and I'm not great at that kind of stuff. Like I could relate to sitting in the bathroom. Sorry if that's too much disclosure, but I understood why you felt that way. Yeah, I liked it too, Maria. I thought it was fun to read. I love to read people in embarrassing situations that I don't have to go through personally. Like when you're in it, it's just pure pain and emotional distress. But when you get to read someone else dealing with it, you just get to vicariously experience it and just be glad that you're not in that bathroom feeling constipated.
Yeah, with that stuff, like I wasn't trying to write like 50 Shades of Grey, right? That wasn't, the point wasn't to write some like erotic nonfiction. And so I tried to like, even from like the piece that I originally submitted for the actual week 2 exercise, I try to like clean it up a little bit and focus a little bit more on the internal conflict and relate it back to sort of the themes and the motifs of the piece, as opposed to, because I think that like if it gets to like too graphic and stuff, not that there's anything wrong if people want to write about like sexual content, but that wasn't really what my piece was about, right? And it would be a little bit distracting if we get this very, very graphic like sex scene and stuff like that, when the whole piece is supposed to be about I think as a couple other people mentioned, it's about like going through failures in life and then just and still pushing forward. You know what I mean? So I tried to sort of clean that section up a little bit to make sure that it didn't kind of fall into complete um, utter depravity.
That's something that's going to vary from reader to reader. Some readers will say, I want it to be more specific. I want get down, get dirty. I want all the details. Some readers will say less is more. Please don't. I remember a previous workshop where you were in that one, Robert, where somebody, I don't want to talk about students' names, but somebody wrote about going to a sex club, and another student in the class was like, I don't know why we're reading this. I don't want to know all this. You were in there, John, right? So my point is, some of us are going to say, like, yes, you went somewhere really scary that I've never gone, and it's fascinating to read your point of view. And other people might say, I don't know why, I'm uncomfortable reading about intimacy and stuff like that. I don't like sex scenes in movies. I don't, you know what I mean? So you got to play to your audience, Robert. What would you want the author to do? And this goes for all of you. What do you want? Because if you try to please everyone, you'll write the most boring thing in the world. You gotta play to your audience.
Well, I'll just say this. I'm not. I guess I'm not making like the argument of like that I would be uncomfortable. Well, I guess I might be uncomfortable, but that I would never write something with like explicit sexual content, or that you couldn't write like through an entire like sex scene with like a lot of details, because that's fine to write that kind of stuff, and I guess it would be fine. I guess if I wrote that stuff, if it was in a tasteful way, whatever. I was just. And I guess if this piece was about my sort of road to sexual exploration, or the theme of the piece was about sex, I think that that all stuff would be fine. But I think particularly for this specific piece, I think I didn't think it was necessary.
Yeah, I think, I don't speak for everybody, but I think you struck a pretty good balance there of like, yeah, it's getting down and dirty, and I'm not going to keep on describing this because the more important thing is I got to go stall for time in the bathroom. You know what I mean? So, and that's what's funny. That's what makes us laugh. That's where we get the endorphins. It's not really an erotic piece. So I think you made the right decision.
Don't worry. The next piece I write, we'll get down and dirty, and I'll be up there trying to compete with E.L. James on the bookshelf.
I hope you get the most sexually uncomfortable professor the UCR has. And I wish I could see that workshop.
Don't worry. Actually, you know what? We'll put it all in the revision, professor. So you'll be the only one who has to read it.
That's weird. I'm just kidding, Robert. But Robert, anything else you want to get from us? Because I think you're going to have to try to squeeze it out of people. I know people are here. I know they're tuned in. They're just not talking.
Well, I guess the last thing I'll say is that I was trying to maybe make improvements, or at least do something different, or experiment with different things from comparatively to anyone who was with me in beginners nonfiction workshop, and read my piece there. There was not a lot of stuff that was in scene. A lot of it was mostly narrative summary, and it took you through sort of like a course of my life from the ages of like 8 to like 25, right? And we get little snippets of things here and there. And there wasn't really, there's practically no dialogue in that piece. There's practically nothing in scene. And so I wanted to, and it's pretty much a chronological story. So I tried to, the only thing I sort of kept from that was sort of my essence of humor, which I think bleeds through all my writing. But telling a non-chronological story, and then trying to actually put things in scene, and then try to experiment a little bit more with dialogue in nonfiction writing, were all things that I kind of wanted to experiment with, that were all commentary and suggestions that I got from last quarter's piece.
I'll take that question. It's like night and day to me, Robert. the other class I had with you, I just felt like there was almost like everything was, you were like ice skating, you know what I mean? Like you were doing all this stuff on the surface and it was cool and you were taking us all over the skating rink, but you weren't really going under the surface to show us some more raw emotion. And you really went there with this one. So to me, there's almost no comparison. It's like reading two different writers. And I'm saying I like this one better. So it's good. It means you're getting better.
Well, good. Yeah. I mean, I'll take that. As a compliment then. That I guess going to these raw, more emotional places, which might make some people uncomfortable or might lose some readers. That this is the stuff that's like really has the the gravitas and sort of like the meat on the bones, and this is the kind of places that we have to discover for ourselves, like as writers, and go to these like uncomfortable places. I mean, there were certainly, it was very uncomfortable, I felt, for me to like have to write like about, even for this class, to write about failing to get into the military. That's incredibly embarrassing, and that was not like a fun time in my life, you know what I mean? So I think that like exploring some of these places like through writing and then releasing it to like a classroom full of people, that was like it was like difficult, but I think it sounds like the reception I'm getting is that it's that going to those more uncomfortable places makes for better writing. So
I'm willing to shut up for someone else to talk, but I think so, absolutely, Robert. And I also want to say that people who don't want that raw truth and laughing at yourself, all this kind of stuff you're doing, they're not going to read this kind of nonfiction. Those people are going to pick up a nonfiction book that's like, here is they can tell already by the cover that it's not going to be too challenging, and it's maybe going to be about like, how they learn to love their dog and love themselves, and it would be kind of a self-help journey type of thing. I'm just giving you an example, but readers know what they're looking for. Like whatever, there's like almost infinite numbers of genres, depending on what the very specific thing is you want from a reading experience. Those readers aren't going to be reading your work. They're not going to want to read about Robert Gold, kind of giving us a scrubbed, clean version of his life. I just don't think that's even worth aspiring to. I think what you've done in B here, your second attempt here in this workshop, is superior.
I appreciate that. That's all. There's nothing else but I'll say this. I appreciate everything that everyone said. I appreciate everything that everyone put in the chat. I appreciate some of the suggestions, and I appreciate all the compliments that everyone gave this piece. And I'm glad that people enjoyed it.
Yes, and remember, a lot of times people are quiet in workshops, like I was when I was a student. But I think what you'll find is people write a lot more in the letters to you and in the manuscript comments that people should be sending everyone. And of course, you'll get that from me, but I think, you'll get a lot from those. You'll see like, I know you take those seriously. So you'll see like where everyone is kind of saying the same thing, like, okay, that definitely needs to be addressed, or that's definitely working. For me, I'm mostly saying it works. I've already told you the couple of little things that maybe would improve it. I think you've done your work. It's good when you turn in this late in the quarter. It's good to see that you've done your work, so you don't have as much to stress you out this next week. Okay, can we take a little break? I don't want to get too graphic, but I have a stomach ache. So can we take like a 10-15 and be back here at 11? Let's say 11:25. Let's do 11:25. And I'm sorry to do that, but maybe you won't mind. I don't know. But I'll see you at 11:25.